I've really been interested in the neurophysiology of the sense of meaning. Because neurophysiology, yeah, because the meaning, the feeling of meaning is an instinct.
Right.
It's not a thought. It's not a secondary consequence of rational processes. It's way deeper than that. It's something that drives rationality itself. So now you were just...
Does it vary amongst people?
Definitely.
Yeah.
But it varies in this way, as far as I can tell. So imagine, as you said, that there's an optimal load, right? You exceed that and to your detriment.
Yes.
And you see that in the weight room. You pull a muscle, you'll hurt yourself.
Yeah.
You can injure yourself very badly, right? You can take yourself out for the count. But then if you work too little, well, then there's no gain in it. You have to find that thin edge where you're competent at what you're doing, but you're pushing yourself. That's going to be where meaning lies. That's what meaning tells people. It says you're on the edge where you're competent and out of undue danger, but pushing yourself enough so that you're continually developing. That's the instinct of meaning. And that looks to me like it's a consequence of the interaction between the right and the left hemispheres, and a consequence of the interaction between the negative emotion systems, anxiety and pain, that regulate you, that protect you from harm, and the exploratory and play systems that drive you forward. You want the exploratory and play systems to drive you forward, but then they're regulated by these negative emotions so you don't hurt yourself. And if you get that optimally right, then that's the point of maximal challenge. And that makes you really alert because your positive emotion is functioning. That's what's driving you forward. This is worth doing. And your negative emotions are alert too, saying, yeah, but be awake and be careful. And you know what that's like in the weight room. If you're lifting something that's at the edge of your ability, and you've got a spotter, you want to push and you can barely do it, and you want to make sure that you're not going to pull your arm down and rip the hell out of your muscle. But you're right on that edge, and that's the place of maximal gain. And that sense of meaning, that's what puts you on the border between chaos and order, right? Because too much order means you're just practicing what you already know. And then you stultify and stagnate. And too much chaos means you better look out because you're going to hurt yourself. You're pushing yourself beyond your limits. You stay right on that edge. That's where there's maximal meaning. This is the antidote to moral relativism. Okay. So the first thing is that there are real problems, and hierarchical organizations can offer real solutions, socially and personally. So you can confront the problems courageously and you can solve them. So that's real. It ameliorates suffering and limits malevolence. And so there's nothing morally relative about that. The second is that sense of meaning that we discussed. That's not some philosophical second-order consequence of thinking. It's way deeper than that. That sense of meaning tells you, when Vygotsky, the Russian psychologist, called that the zone of proximal development, which I believe is where the phrase the zone came from. And so in the zone of proximal development, this is what adults do with children, little kids that are learning to talk. Adults automatically talk to little children who are learning to talk at a level that slightly exceeds their current vocabulary. They do that without even knowing it. And that puts those kids in the zone, right? Because if you just talk baby talk to kids, then all they learn is baby talk. And if you just talk like an adult, then they don't understand a word you're saying. So you find this happy medium in between where the kid mostly understands what you're talking about and that you're pulling them forward. So that puts them in the zone. And that's a meaningful zone. And so you can feel the operation of that zone in your own life. That's what the Taoists are on about, because they say, well, the Tao is the way, right? And that's the pathway between chaos and order. That's meaning. And you can feel that in your life when you're deeply engaged in something. Like we have deeply engaging conversations, okay, which is part of the reason that we keep having them, and I think why they're popular. And we're not paying attention to how the clock is ticking or how time is flowing or even to the fact that we're doing what we're doing. We're just having a conversation. And it's meaningful. It's engaged. It keeps our eyes focused and our senses concentrated on what's happening. And the reason for that is that there's enough information flowing between us so that we're being slightly transformed as a consequence of the discussion, right? So we're both comfortable. We trust each other. We trust that the conversation is aimed at something that's of mutual benefit. We trust each other to tell the truth to the degree that we're capable of doing that. And then when you engage in this exchange of information, and to the degree that it's breaking you down a little bit and building you up in a different way, that's a little death and rebirth. There's constant little deaths and rebirths in a meaningful conversation. Then that keeps you alive and functioning. And that focuses you, like that speaks to you so deeply that focus happens without any consciousness. And that's meaning. And that's that line between chaos and order. And that's real. That has nothing, and I would say, here's another thing that's cool. So that line between chaos and order, that's the same thing that's happening when you're playing a game properly, right? Because you're in the game and you're exercising your skill, but you're pushing it. But you're pushing it in a way that's also a benefit to your teammates and to the progression of the game as such, and to being a better general player. You're doing all that at the same time. And you're evolved with enough natural intelligence so that the sum total output of your nervous system says to you, you're in the right place at the right time doing the right thing. And that's what makes your life meaningful. And that's real. And I think it's more real than anything else. I think it's more real than suffering. I think it's more real than malevolence, because it's the antidote to both of those. And so the whole moral relativism issue for me is a non-starter. It's just wrong. There's lots of ways of interpreting the world, but there aren't very many ways of interpreting it optimally. And you can feel when you're doing that. It makes you stronger.